Okay, we have just about another minute. Want to let you know that this is being recorded, and the recording for it will be hosted on the Evergreen, Indiana training YouTube channel as soon as I can get it mildly edited and uploaded. I have several other videos that I'm going to be spending time doing the same, so hope to see that up there in the next week or so. And then also there will be a follow-up email that comes out in the next couple of weeks that will include any pertinent links in it, your LEU certificate, and also some information about letting us know if your library is interested in pursuing acquisitions. So today we are here for the third in this first series for acquisitions in Evergreen, Indiana, version 3.7. And we're going to be talking about workflows. The first session was just an introduction to what acquisitions is. And then yesterday we had a session about administration, so getting things set up to use acquisitions. Today, I have really been wrestling with how to approach the workflows because they can become so customized and they can be as simple as your library needs or as complex as your library needs. And in Evergreen, Indiana, we have such a broad cross-section of library configurations. So we have some larger and smaller single branch systems. We have larger and smaller multi-branch systems with varying staff models and all of that. And so one of the cool things about acquisitions, similar to Evergreen, Indiana in general, is that it can work for all of those library configurations, but that means that those workflows really are customized to your local library. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at some of those components that are involved in there and some of the interactions and some of the tools that you can decide to use. And then following this class, if you are interested in implementing at this library, and I know there are some in here who already have this implemented in their library, but if you are interested in implementing it in your library, then to contact the Evergreen, Indiana administrative team directly. At this point, that means emailing me, and then we'll talk about what your library is doing right now in terms of getting the materials that it needs and how acquisitions might be included in that to streamline your processes and how we can help you get that started. So just a reminder, I am Ruth Frazier. My contact information is here. You are always welcome to email me directly. You can call me. If I'm out of the office, I do check voicemail as soon as I get in, and I see missed calls as well. So I will return your phone call if you leave a message for me. I'm going to both begin and end this class today with this slide, the resources slide. This is linked, and I'm going to go ahead and share with you in chat a link for the slide deck here, so you have access to all of these links right now rather than later. So this first one, and I did get a chance to, it still says incomplete, but I did get a chance to do some more work in this yesterday, is the Evergreen, Indiana Acquisitions Training Manual. And this is going to cover, probably better than I'm going to cover it today, some of these topics. Again, this is hosted in Google Docs, so you can use the outline view to navigate. I also like to use Control F in my browser And that's going to help me navigate even further through here. So if I want to, if I know what I'm looking for, I can start typing and it's going to let me jump around through here. So then the next thing that I have linked here are two sections in the Evergreen general documentation. So this is documentation for the software that is compiled by the development community. The first part is for acquisitions administration. And even if you are not an individual who is going to be setting this up in your library, I'd encourage you to take a look through this. There's also administration in the Evergreen, Indiana training manual. A little bit that still needs to be completed, but you can just kind of take a look through here. On the left-hand side, you're going to find your major categories, and then on your right-hand side, you're going to find it split out even further into topic areas. And then actually using acquisitions, this is going to not really go in order for how to use it, but it's going to talk about the pieces and some of the mechanisms. Well, as many of the mechanisms as have been documented so far. Again, if I click on one of these major topics in here, it's going to then include the contents for a more granular look into this, so I can link through there. The search up here is not real great. So unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with reading kind of walls of text, but the information is in there and it is valuable. Go ahead and close this. And then the other thing that we've talked a lot about in the past two classes is the planning worksheet. And as acquisitions is being implemented in your library, this is very important to take a look at this. This is the general one. To use this, you're going to need to make a copy, either to download it as, my recommendation is Excel if you have access to that, or if you have access to Google Drive, to just make a copy of this, name it whatever you want in your local Google Drive, and then you'll have access to all of these tabs. The reason I show this to you today is so that you understand what should already be set up as you are going in to use acquisitions. So staff should already have their permissions, funding sources and funds should be now available. There should be money for you to spend. Those vendors, the providers where you're getting the things from should be established already. And this information that is in here, these are all just kind of placeholders or examples. They can be easily taken out, edited, used however. Once you have a copy of the spreadsheet, it's really yours to use however you want to, but this provides this framework. If there are claiming policies, which we'll talk just very briefly about today, and distribution formulas and things like that. So those would be in here. There is a tab in here for workflows, and this really can be where those individuals who are going to be following this material as it gets ordered and then comes into the library and gets processed to go into the collection and out to the public, where those steps, and I have this based out by provider because I know that that tends to be where there is differences in this workflow, where those different steps can be mapped out. None of these workflows are complete. This is meant to be a jumping off point as you are thinking about how it's going to work in your library. And again, this is something that can be done independently in a library, can be done with our assistants, whatever works best to get this moving for you. So what we're going to be talking about today are the different things that have to that are used to do these steps. First, the preparation of an order, meaning what stuff are you going to get? How many of those things are you going to get? How are you going to pay for it? And where is it going to go when it comes into your library? Then how you are initiating that order. In some cases, for some vendors, you're going to be using a process called EDI, which is electronic data interchange, or you're going to be doing it manually. And we'll talk about some different ways that even a manual order is automated. When you are loading records, are you actually initiating an order as you load the records? Are you loading records right after, right before, all sorts of things? And this is, again, where those workflows can definitely, are definitely customized to what's happening in your library. Then when those things are actually shipped to you, how do you account for them in the system? How do you receive them? And if you receive them in a way that says, that's not what I was expecting, or you don't receive what you were expecting, how perhaps are you going to claim that? And then how are you going to account for payment of those things? Again, there may be an automated process in place depending on where you're getting this from and the relationship that you have with them digitally, and that's going to be through EDI or maybe manual as well. And then the final part of this, and I say final, and I want to definitely say that when I kind of give these definitive spots in the process, they're not as definitive as they sound, because I have here as the last step catalog, as in cataloging, but parts of that may be happening while other things are going on here. And again, this is a reminder that these workflows are going to be determined by who you have in your library doing what and what order these things are happening. There is a basic thing. Of course, you have to determine what you're going to order before you can order it, and you have to order it before you can ever receive it. But within that, there can be some flexibility, and often is. I mentioned this yesterday. I'm going to mention it again today because there are a few different people in here. I was talking with a colleague about acquisitions actually just a few days ago, and they made the comment that if you ask 5 libraries about acquisitions, you'll get 8 opinions. The idea being that this is meant to be something that works for your library, which is why I'm also encouraging you to reach out to us if you are wanting to implement this in your library. And also knowing that there are some in here who are using it, that if there's something that you want to change or you're struggling with or anything like that, that is always a point of encouragement to contact us so we can help you work through that. And then also, and I probably should have not gone on my little spiel there before I said that, holds. We're going to talk about patron requests, but not all of the things that we acquire are going to have necessarily patron requests for them, but there are going to be holds that are placed on those on order records, and making sure that those are fulfilled in a timely manner for our patrons. That's really the point, isn't it? We're going to be looking at a lot of the tools, and I will be going through several interfaces, pointing out how they work, how they interact. And I would encourage you today, even if there's something that this inspires a question for you, to just ask it. Don't feel like you need to wait and see if I'm going to cover it, because I honestly don't know how to show a workflow to you more than I want to show you the tools that you can implement in your workflows. So we're going to be looking, first of all, at how we navigate in the acquisitions module, which includes all of these tools. We're going to be looking at line items first, and then we'll be looking at selection lists pretty briefly, and then purchase orders, invoices, and then search. I put search last, even though in my mind I think, man, it'd be great to have it first, but until you understand what the other components are, search is kind of meaningless. So we're going to start with navigation, and I will be going between the slides, and I'm going to actually be using the production client to show you things today. I had hoped to be doing some things in the training server, but as I went in it and thinking into it and thinking about how diverse your workflows may be, I didn't really want to muddy the waters. So I am planning to also, for those who are interested, to have more of a lab session that we can plan for, and I can get feedback from you to show you specific things for that. Right now, and I use this term a lot for migrating libraries, I'm going to spend this kind of context building, because there are several of you in here today who have never used any acquisitions whatsoever. And so acquisitions within an ILS framework. And so I want you to be able to have that context so that when we talk about doing some specific things in here, it makes more sense and we're a little bit closer to the starting line together. So in terms of navigation, you're going to be able to access most of the tools from the acquisitions menu, the top nav bar there. But there are definitely some other places that we're going to be looking. We're going to be looking briefly at the item status screen, because that's going to also provide us with some acquisitions information later on, which can be helpful. And then also within patron accounts. It is, and also actually, and I didn't put it in here, we're also going to be looking at it through the catalog. There are probably other interfaces that I have not discovered yet, either through just reading documentation or playing around in the client, where there are some other access points into the acquisitions tools. There is also development in the works to provide more. And I wish that we had more conversation about this thing called an ILS, being an integrated library system, and what that word integrated means, that we have all of these things. We are working more and more to get acquisitions integrated into all the other aspects of Evergreen. So I'm going to go ahead and start with line items. Line items are really the building block that bring all of the information together for those things that we're ordering. We're going to talk about how we are preparing orders in a second with both purchase orders and selection lists. But line items are those things that are actually the components within both purchase orders and selection lists. They represent all of the different attributes of that item that is being ordered. And it says here also there are links to other acquisitions and catalog interfaces. Within these line items, they're first generated by a record. It could be an on-order record, it could be a brief record if you haven't received on-order records either from a vendor or from a selection list from something in the catalog. But this is where we get this record and we start adding information for how many copies do we want to get? Where are we going to pay for it from? Where should it go? Where should it go when we receive it? So copy location there. How much does it cost? Those types of things all being in here. And then you can see within this line item, there are some links. And they're going to take you to different places. In this case, for the example on the screen here, we have Black Panther. And this is the Blu-ray version. So some of this information that comes out in here is going to come from the mark that is associated with that. In this case, the record actually came from the Evergreen catalog. So this is something that already had a record in the Evergreen catalog. Then there is a link here to that catalog record, an automatically generated worksheet, which is available for all line items. And it shows more information about where it's going to be routed, what fund it does. The worksheet is kind of a printable thing. Some libraries use it. Most don't, but it really is up to you and it's there. Then we also have in here the selection list. If there is a selection list that is associated with it, as well as the purchase order, if there is a purchase order for it yet. Are there any patron requests associated with it? Any invoices that have been generated yet? Who is the provider for it? And so all of that information gets linked here and it gets added in as those things become available. In some cases, they're available right away. In other cases, they become available over time. In this case, on the example I have here, I have already expanded this generally, and we'll take a look into the catalog direct or into the ILS directly in just a second, because I'm going to show you how I navigate through this in a couple ways. But I already have this expanded. When you first look at that, come to a line item, that's going to be closed. And in this case, I just use the expand link within the line item. If you have multiple line items, in the case of either a selection list or a purchase order, you can click expand all and see this additional information here for all of those lines. There's also an input box that you can do some actions from here. If you selected, there's also an actions menu up that you can use for multiple records at a time. So a lot of functionality happens right here in just the line item. So I'm going to go ahead and go into general search here. And I'm going to be using the general search quite a bit going through this, even though I'm going to talk about search at the end as well. So it will probably be pretty quick touching on that as we get there. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for the line item that we just used. And I want to show you some differences here. Full disclosure, as I'm doing this, I have never used acquisitions in a live library setting. I've spent a lot of time working on the development of interfaces. I've done a lot of testing with it. I have thought through a lot of the scenarios, but I've never been in a library that actually used this on a day-to-day basis. And so I needed some training, and we had some training with Equinox in days past. I can't remember exactly what day, it was last week sometime. And there was a specific thing that I did not know, and I'm going to show you this. This is an important thing, but we'll get there in just a second. So I'm going to search specifically for this line item that we just looked at. I have the ID written down. You can actually see it right here. This number that is at the beginning of all of this information here, this is the line item ID. So I'm going to select from all of these, and you can see all of these options that I have here. The default for this is going to be line item ID is something. I'm going to get rid of the second field because I know I don't need that. And then I'm going to put that actually in here. And I'm going to just click search. And this is what it looks like in this new interface. What you can do here, if I click on this right here, it's going to open it into the purchase order. I can view the catalog for this. Let's see, make sure that pops out. There we go. If there is a catalog link, there may not be. In this case, there is. I can look at the worksheet that is automatically generated again, so you don't need to worry about doing this. This is what it looks like in that case. If that's useful for you, I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. And all of these other things. Now, the thing that I want to show you here, and the reason that this became important as, we'll talk. So Megan has a great question here about link to catalog. And we'll look at that in just a second. Yes. Okay, so this became an issue for the line items because, an issue, I don't want to say that. One of the things that one of our libraries uses is they receive, they have huge purchase orders, and purchase orders are one of those things that depending on how big they are, they take longer and longer to load because they pull in all of this information. We'll look at it in just a second. And so they like to receive by line item, but you can't actually do that from this screen. You see there isn't an option to receive here. If I click on this line item ID, it's going to take me into the purchase order, even though there's also a purchase order link here. And so, but it can be done if you actually use the legacy search interface. So I'm going to go to that real quick. And so until we have that ability to receive in the other interface, we're going to actually receive here because we're going to actually search for this line item here, because it's going to actually open this differently. So now we're searching it and it looks significantly different. This is just that line item, but now I have the option, and I'm going to go ahead and click on copies here. So that and I have to wait a second for this to load, because I see that there were 3 ordered, but there's no information here. And now all of a sudden it's loaded. And then if there was something still here to receive and there is not, you can see that the last one that needs to be received is actually canceled. Then I could receive it here. Whereas as if I were to go through the other interface, I'd have to receive it through the purchase order, which just takes forever to load. So an idiosyncrasy there. Okay, as a purchaser and not a cataloger, I'm a bit nervous about MARC records I upload from Baker and Taylor potentially affecting the catalog. So that is actually different from the link to catalog button. Because in some respects. Because it's actually, when you are uploading those records, it then is creating a catalog thing. So it would just say catalog there. Usually the only time you see the link to catalog is when you are creating brief records, and then you find, for whatever reason, what maybe you have loaded MARC records separately and now you need to link to that. And then there's some cataloging issues from there. That does not answer that question. I guess I'm not really sure how to alleviate your nervousness other than to say, don't be nervous. But I am hoping to actually, let me see if I have some, let's keep going. If I find a brief record, we'll use that one. Otherwise, I will create one and we'll go from there. So the next part of this, now that we've looked at line items, first of all, apart from the link to catalog button, which I will say that in this, let me close that one. Oh, let me not close that one. I'm going to use this one actually right now. You can see here that this says catalog, and it links actually to a catalog record. Not all line items are linked to catalog records right away. And if they are not, rather than it say catalog here, it's going to say link to catalog. So I am going to go ahead and kind of skip over. Would it help if I said that when I upload brief records from Baker and Taylor, I choose not to import over an existing MARC? Yes, so it really does depend on what you're doing. So what Anita is doing in their library is they are importing through the batch import-export tool on order records, not using acquisitions. And this is not using the acquisitions module. It is important to stop right here and say that your library is already doing acquisitions. Every library is doing acquisitions. They just may not be using the tools that are in the acquisitions module for Evergreen. So you're all purchasing, you're all importing records, you're all connecting this. What the acquisitions module does is it combines those things. In some cases, it streamlines them. In some cases, and Anita is from Kendallville, they have streamlined their order process so that they've already kind of gone onto the on-ramp for this. They already have their on-order books. And so for their on-order records, they're not merging with existing ones that are already in the system because of reasons. But when they are receiving them, my assumption is that then they're going in and they're merging records with, if there are existing catalog records in there. And then Monica brings up a very important point here, that if you are not a Cat 1, there's only so much that you can do anyway in terms of the catalog. You're not going to mess anything up. And it's going to be your cataloging staff that's going to align your acquisitions and your catalog records, period. And I'm going to go ahead and read this aloud here, since this won't be, the chat is not documented in the recording. So I'm going to read it. Monica says, it's also worth noting that unless you're Cat 1, you can't really affect the catalog much. As a purchaser, the only thing you can do is import a bad record or overlay an existing record, either of which your Cat 1 can fix for you once the item is in hand. So once it has actually arrived in your library, it's gone through receiving and it's gone to cataloging to do the cleanup work for that. Okay, so I'm going to go into selection lists, and I'm going to go pretty quickly through this because it's one of those things that I have found only some libraries are interested in using it, and it tends to be libraries that either involve a large proportion of their staff to do collection development. Well, I guess that actually says it all, a large proportion. So even if you have a small staff, it could be maybe everybody on staff can participate in this to create selection lists, which are essentially wish lists for your purchasers to determine whether or not these are going to be purchased. The other part of selection lists is this is also a mechanism for aggregating patron requests to populate a purchase order. So these are, they can be created in several manners. The easiest way, there are several easy ways once you know where they're at, is to go through the acquisitions menu and go to selection lists. And you have the opportunity here to create a new selection list. Just essentially give it a name. A selection list. Terrible name, but I'm terrible at naming things. It's going to show up in here. And I'm going to actually search based on what I've created. And I go into this and there's nothing in it, right? So then what I can do is I can search the catalog. And this is where you can, one of the ways that you can populate this. I'm going to go ahead and do a search real quickly. And once I get in here, I'm excited by the possibility of patrons being able to place holds on order items, but don't want to accidentally make more work for my catalogers. Bless you for not wanting to make more work for your catalogers. Really, the key to this is, first of all, to understand that implementing in your library is, first of all, a lot of work up front. And then a little bit more work to make sure that everybody is on the same page on what your workflows are going to be, to work out the kinks for that, and to also, if at all possible, start small. So you don't necessarily need to roll acquisitions out in a way that covers all of your materials completely. You can do this in a pilot sense so that you're maybe only doing this for one collection in your library, or for one vendor that your library uses, or something like that. So there are ways to kind of ramp up for this if you want to, or you can go all in or right away and open the fire hose and be prepared to take a little bit of vacation after it is implemented satisfactorily. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into this record here. And from here, I now have the opportunity to, from other actions, once I'm in a record, to view or place orders. This is going to allow me to either add this to a selection list or to a purchase order. In this case, I'm going to wait till it populates, add it to the selection list that I created. In the newer interfaces, this is a little bit more friendly, but in this case, I'm going to add it to that. This is a selection list, and then it's going to open that selection list. Again, it's going to take a moment to load. And now you can see that in the selection list that I created, I now have a line item. Now, because I did this from a catalog record, this already says catalog. There's nothing really to do here. You can see that there is already a generated worksheet here. I'm going to scroll up. I don't have any items or anything like that, but I can start to do some work on this from here. I'm going to go into chat real quick and read out this comment. Monica says, it's likely that your catalogers will have to do a fair bit of work anyway, because the on-order records you import will probably need to be improved or cataloged from scratch. Yep. You should also remember that we're in a consortium, so the possibility that someone else has already imported a record or cataloged a title is decent to high, depending on if you are one of the libraries that orders things sometimes 12 months in advance, or orders them a month or so beforehand, which could remove the burden of the MARC record from you, the purchaser. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to, I think I have a distribution formula for here. Yeah, I do. So I'm just going to pick this, and we'll talk a little bit about distribution formulas. They are templates, essentially, that allow you to have some things already defined. So if I apply this to that template, the distribution formula, to that line item, I'm going to wait for this to load again. And we can see that I have started adding some more information to this line item, where previously there were no copies. Now there are. I'm going to go ahead, and in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and select that and expand all, even though there's only one. And in this case, I have funds that have been applied to that. Of course, I need to update my funds. It should be 2022. And there is a setting that allows that to happen directly for your distribution formulas. And now I can make some more decisions from this selection list. Do I want to either add to an already created purchase order or create a purchase order? The selection list may be the starting point in your library for determining what you want to order. It is most often not the starting point. The most normal starting point is actually with your vendor. And so it may be in Midwest Tape's website interface where, and I believe Midwest Tape, it's been a long time since I did purchasing with them. They have carts similar to Baker and Taylor, which they supply you with, or maybe you're using professional literature and just looking things up directly through Baker and Taylor or Ingram or like that, and you're populating carts. Those are very often where the selection list, the wish list, the order preparation list begins. So you may not ever use a selection list in your library, but it is there if you want to. The next thing, and I've mentioned this several times, purchase orders. Purchase orders are the workhorse of acquisitions, and they are either going to be automatically created They may be automatically created if you're using EDI. They can be automatically created from a selection list, or they can be manually created. Oftentimes, and this specifically comes into play when ordering from places like Amazon, where of course, if Amazon, are we able to use the selection list for those items not in the database? Yes, you are. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit to that then. And I'm going to go into this selection list that I'm already in. And if you have things that are not yet in the database, you can do what is called adding a brief record. I kind of think of this sort of like pre-cat, but it's not necessarily. And you're just going to fill in this information. I'm going to say, title of this thing. And self-published, because we all love self-published things in libraries. And that's all I'm going to do here. I'm going to save that record, and that is going to then create that line item in the selection list. Now, obviously, this is going to be something that the purchaser is going to look at it and say, oh, I've never heard of the title of this thing. But if I happen to have an order identifier for that or something like that, then they could either find something in the catalog to link it. And this is actually a good place here to show you what this does. Link to catalog. I can do a search for this. I'm terrified to see if there's actually something called title of this thing in here. Oh, now that's what I call Halloween. I'm going to go ahead and select that, even though I know there's no possible way that is a real thing. And once I do that, this is not going to add a holding or anything like that, but it is going to provide an entry point for the catalog process when it comes to connecting those items that were, in some cases, we are overlaying, and this is something that the cataloger is going to do, transferring holdings once there are actual copies associated with this, those types of things. So now I have this actual link to a catalog record. Do you have to be a Cat 1 to add a brief record? You do not need to, because it's not a bibliographic record. It's just essentially, it's not a pre-cat record, but it kind of is like that thing. It is not something that shows up in the catalog or anything like that. And the link to catalog is you're actually using a record that already exists there. And again, that isn't going to show holdings until actual holdings are there. So you do not have to be a Cat 1 to do either of those things. You do have to have at least selector permission to add a brief record. I think that you only have to have selector permission for either of those two things, but I can't say definitively without actually looking at the permission groups, and that would be a very boring thing for you guys to watch right now, but I could do it if you want me to. So I'm going to go ahead and in this line item, not either. Actually, I am going to go into this one real quick since it's a real thing. Oh, you see that I clicked the wrong thing. I'm going to go to the catalog record. And from here, I am going to just view this one for Fulton County because I do want to show you view this in a list, that if this is originated from the acquisitions module, there is the option to, and this can become important in some cases. I mean, if your library is not using acquisitions, there's no reason to do this. But if your library is, there may be reason to go back into this and see the process that happened to bring it in here. Maybe something has been lost or damaged and you need to reorder it. And this can take you actually to the originating purchase order, which includes vendor information, so that if you needed to reorder it, you could. This is not a great example because this did not originate from in acquisitions, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a catalog search. And I know for a fact that there's somebody in here from Porter County. So I'm going to go ahead and see here. Porter County is a user of acquisitions. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to go into one that I see that has been received here. It's checked out. So now if I go to this originating acquisition, I'm going to go to one that has not been received, and I'm going to go to this list and originating acquisition. And it's going to actually take me into this purchase order. Now, one thing that I do want to, this is a good way to show you this, is that currently with this interface that is going to be thankfully updated in the next upgrade for Evergreen, Indiana, it's really slow depending on the number of items that are in that purchase order. And you can see from here that there are 322 line items. And I actually just want to get it to start loading, and then I'm going to, oh, it doesn't even want to do that. Maybe it's because I have all these tabs open. It really depends on if your browser is going to put up with it or not. It could be because I have Zoom also on. So all that to say, this is actually expected behavior. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to exit that page. Oh, snap. We'll look at the smaller purchase order here in a second. So I am going to hop back into general search. And in this case, I'm going to go to purchase orders. Now, another thing that I will point out here is that there are several places that take you to the same-ish place. So I just went to general search and it brought me to this search interface. If I go to selection list, it takes me to the exact same place, but it takes me to the selection lists tab by default. If I go to purchase order, same thing, except for it takes me to the purchase order tab. If I go to invoices, same thing, just the invoices tab. So this really, the search is the bread and butter for getting around here. Keeping in mind that you also have access to the legacy search interface. And when we get to this actual search in here, I'm going to skip it for you. In here, you have the same options. They're just not as pretty. So you can still search by line items or line item in catalog. Records actually is the same thing. If we look in line items down here, we're searching by line items. That would be the top one in the legacy interface. If we're searching by line item attribute, that would be if we were searching by line items in catalog records, and then selection list, purchase orders, and invoices. So here, if I do this, then I can also select, pop down here. These are the ones that are available. The ones that are not available are grayed out in this case. So I can select from a standard identifier if I wanted to search here. That is different than here, where I can essentially select whatever I want. These are all, in most cases, they work exactly the same, except for there are a different set of defaults that you can set. So if I was doing this and I wanted to go by ISBN, and I can set this as my line item search, then, and I can also have this set to automatically populate. So now I'm just gonna borrow an ISBN here. I don't think this is the one that I want. I'm going to grab a different ISBN than that one. Oh, that looks lovely. Let's just grab that. So then if I am here, I can line item ID. That is not what I want. That's what I want. Yeah, too many tabs open. And then you can see any line item that includes this. Now, I have this obviously not scoped to a particular place, but I could also have a line item. What would I choose here? Actually, I think I would choose purchase order owner. And in this case, let's say at Hussey Mayfield. Oh, this is by person, isn't it? Ordering agency, there we go. So now I can see any line item that has included this ISBN, and the ordering agency is Hussey Mayfield Zionsville branch. And I have two of those line items. From here, you can see as soon as there is something available, it starts to populate this. Both of these have been received. If I just scroll over that, I also get some more text here. You can see when the line item was created. Then we also have the option to see some other columns here. So some more tools in there. Okay, so I'm going to actually pick one of these purchase orders, and I'm going to hop right in. So in this purchase order, we can see that this is on order. One of the things about purchase orders is that the status for the purchase order is not necessarily the same as the status for the line item. So line items have a status and purchase orders have a status. This purchase order is going to stay in an on order status until everything that has been ordered here has been marked as received. Now, within the purchase order, the line items are color coded based on their status. They are, I believe that they are yellow when they are pending. There is actually a chart that says exactly what they are. Once they have been ordered, they're going to be this kind of light red, pink color. There are multiple pinks, so that's when that little chart, I believe that it's either in the Evergreen Indiana acquisitions documentation or in the general documentation that has the color listings here. Once it has been received, it goes to this gray color, so that can just be a handy way to see what you're still waiting on. Once things have been paid for, so they've gone through the invoice process, this will say paid, and then there's also a paid indicator that shows up here. Within the purchase order, there are actions that can be done for the individual line items, so you can update the barcodes there. You can also do holdings maintenance once it's time to start actually having items reflected in the catalog there. And this is generally where we see that interaction between, at the least, acquisitions and Cat 2 catalogers. If there are claims, so if something didn't show up or something showed up damaged or something, and there needs to be some interaction with the vendor or something that needs to be done to that record that could have some claims there, or you can view the history. You also have the option to select multiple line items in here and then have access to the actions menu up top, which gives you more things that you can do. You can also expand all of these to see what is already set up there. If there is work to be done on an individual copy, if you want to receive from here, you can do that. You can see all of the things that have already been established. Now, this has already been activated, meaning these things have already been ordered. So in most cases, these things, once they have been ordered, can't be changed. In some cases, they can. If I wanted to receive this here, of course, I'm not going to because it's Zionsville's. I could do that in here. You can also see that there are links to the vendor, any holds that are here. And I'm going to actually click on this in just a second. And so this is going to be then also the provider, or the actual name of the purchase order. The provider is up here in the summary. I'm going to go ahead and click on this holds here. Oh, I see. So that is, oh, that's actually part of this, the name for this. So these were patron requests. Okay. Any questions about what you have seen so far? I know that this is a lot and does not necessarily show you how to do much of anything. What it should do is to provide you some more information about what is in here, so that when we talk about how to use it, and I'll talk a little bit about how to use it in a second, that you have more context for that. I do want to take a little bit more look at what is going on up here in the header for this purchase order. So I am going to, from here, actually from the acquisitions menu, I'm going to go to purchase orders, and I'm going to create a blank purchase order. I'm going to go here first, and then I'm going to go to purchase orders. Oh, I'll just do it from this. And I'm going to go ahead and say test PO, and I'm going to pick my provider. is going to be Amazon. Not that. Yep, that. And no, prepayments not required. So I'm going to create this blank purchase order. So I have no line items in this. I'm going to go ahead and just add a brief record so that I have a line item. And I'm going to put in a fake identifier. Identifiers are going to be your UPC, your ISSN, or your ISBN. Oh, should have, just for the sake of the cause, started with 978. I'm going to let that populate. It's going to take just a second to show my line item. You can see that this is new. It is not even pending because I don't have any copies yet. So, and you can see also this is not linked to the catalog. I just created a brief record. So until I link it to a catalog record, meaningless there. But up here at the top, you can see, first of all, that it has the name that I gave it. It's populated the provider. And then it has an ID that is automatically generated. That ID I find to be the easiest way to communicate with other people about what purchase order I'm talking about. And that's also the same for line items and for selection lists. There's always going to be an automatically generated ID that is discoverable for you. This becomes really important if you are asking for help desk support, to have that ID really as the quickest way to get into purchase orders or whatever record we're looking for, is to have that ID. So you can also see from here that, I want to hop over to this one. You can see in this purchase order that has a status of on order that it is showing as activated. Activated means that it has been ordered. Now, if you are using EDI for this purchase order, it's actually activated. It is ordered through the EDI process when you activate the purchase order. There are a couple different places that you can do that. You can either do it when you're loading the on order records, or you can not activate it then. You can wait until it populates the purchase order and you can activate it from this interface. So there are options there as well. But this we know has been ordered. This is EDI. I know for sure that because there's EDI messages. We can click on that and you can see that this has gone through the full process here, where this was sent, and then these were ones that were sent back from, in this case, Baker and Taylor. So it was initiated at 1:20 on December the 16th. That was information sent out to Baker and Taylor saying, hey, we want to order this stuff. And then it was sent back from Baker and Taylor saying, hey, we got your record. This is what the order that we've placed. And then also information coming back about the invoice. So all that to say, we know that because these messages exist, this is an order placed via EDI. I'm going to pop back into the purchase order here. Now, if I look at the purchase order that I have just created, you can see that I have this light yellow. That means that this is not ready. Is it activatable? No, it's not, because I don't have any price in there. Not only do I not have any price, and I can just go ahead and add a price. Just by typing it in there, click out of there, it's going to automatically save it. And now you can see that I have a different message that says, is it activatable? No, it doesn't have any copies to it. So you can't send an order for something that has 0 copies unless you select this button. I'm not entirely sure what workflow this accommodates, but I do know that it has accommodated some workflows in the past for different libraries where I can now activate this with no copies in there. This is not going to be anything EDI related. In fact, it will fail if there are no copies. But I can also go into copies and I can add them, and I can, it's going to default to 1. If I want to apply a distribution formula, if I happen to have one in here, and this is kind of funky here because you have to know which one you're going to use, and I'm going to just pick adult fiction. See what this does. This is not owned by me. Noble County. So I could even from here then change this to my own library if that gets me started for some reason. And I'm going to change this to an actual thing that is associated with my library. Let's see if I can. Oh, it doesn't want to do that like that. So we'll do this. There we go. And so I can then save the changes. And let's see, I want to have a fund associated with that. I'm going to pick this. I don't have anything else right now that I want to add to that. So I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. I'm going to return to my purchase order. And you can see now I have 1 copy in here. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And I'm going to search because, let's see, I want this to be new. Nope, that's not the one. Search. I close that. I'm going to go back to search here. Purchase orders. And yep. And I'm going to pop into this, should be my purchase order. You can see I have some 1 line item. It has a price. And now I have the option to either activate it or to activate it without loading items. So this is an important distinction right here. If you are using EDI for this, now I would not be with this one. Amazon doesn't support EDI yet. Once I click activate, if it's not using EDI, that's essentially saying that I ordered it somewhere else and I want to reflect it as being ordered here. So it doesn't really do anything other than it says, hey, this is on order. Whereas if you are using EDI from here and it hasn't, and you have the option to activate the order, when you click activate order here, it's going to then initiate that conversation with the vendor to place that order. So that can be one of the ways to actually initiate the real-time ordering of things. Now, what happens more often than that, and I'm going to use Baker and Taylor because they are the most common one that we talk about in terms of using the EDI, the automatic ordering, is that you're going to go into Title Source 360. And you are going to create your cart of things to order, but you're not going to order it in Title Source 360. You're going to export the order records for that. And you'll have already gone through the process of setting up what is contained in those order records as far as how many you're ordering, what funds you're going to be using, where they're going to be distributed to if you're a multi-branch system, those things. And you're going to actually be going, rather than into this purchase order, you probably don't have a purchase order created yet. You're going to go into acquisitions, load, mark, order records. And from here, you're going to be selecting that file that you downloaded. There's some other things here. You're going to be selecting your org unit. You can see when we're looking at Hussey Mayfield, their order unit is actually Hussey Mayfield, the Zionsville branch. And so it would be Hussey Mayfield, Zionsville, whereas Porter County, they're actually using their system as the context org unit. You could be adding these things to a selection list, but in this case, we're talking about on order records from Baker and Taylor. I'm going to just select from here. I'll select ISO. So this would be the provider that is going to be associated with it. Then you have, and going through all of these selection lists, note 2022, it is recommended that you create a new queue as you are doing this, but you could upload to an existing queue. The reason that we recommend that you create a new queue, and my personal recommendation is that you use kind of a date provider context kind of name for this, is that if you're just adding to an existing queue, those can get very big. And as they get bigger, they get more and more difficult to load. So the recommendation is that you create a new queue. You may be selecting, well, you need to have a record match set if there are things already in there. The recommendation for this is that you select the ISXN or UPC. And then a merge profile for these. And I'm not sure, Monica, you might actually, and I think Dawn is in here as well. Monica and Dawn work together at Jackson County, and Dawn Jackson is also there. What are you choosing for your merge profile when you load these? Yeah, so definitely for Vandelay or for the Mark batch import export tool, it's usually preserve Evergreen Indiana policies. And you can use that here in acquisitions as well. I know that in some cases, they also use the match only merge. Either one is fine, because odds are likely that this is going to be going to a cataloger at some point anyway. And then you can select some of these as well, merge on exact match or merge on best match. I don't do that one. Yeah, import non-matching records. But the key to all of this is actually up here, selecting create purchase order. What that's going to do is you're going to start with these order records from your vendor. You're uploading them. And as you're uploading them, you're automatically creating a purchase order. Now, when you have done that, if you have all of your holdings information mapped out with this vendor, then you may be prepared to also activate that automatically. The recommendation is that, yes, load items for imported records if you, especially if you have those set up with Baker and Taylor. And that really is one of the nice things about having all of that set up through EDI is that you already have all of this set up. If you want to double check everything before you actually initiate that EDI process, you can create that purchase order and then go into it, and then you may need to do some adjusting. Remember that once you have done that adjusting, well, you don't really have to do it back in their interface, doesn't really matter. Then you can activate it from the purchase order. If you're confident that this is all set up, you've done this a few times, you can also have it activate from here. And then it's just a matter of downloading those order records from the provider, uploading them to Evergreen, creating that, making sure that this is selected, making sure that activate is selected, and then that all becomes automated. And then you're ready to start actually, once it is ordered, you are ready to start receiving those things and jumpstarting all of these things as in terms of making them available to patrons to place holds on, to and well, that is really the big thing, is making sure that they are there for patrons to place hold on. There can also be some cataloging that can start in some cases. Sometimes you can do things before the things are in hand, sometimes you can't. So this is a part of that purchase order process. You can create those, again, just a blank one like I did, or they may be automatically created. Another place that they can kind of be halfway automatically created is if you have a selection list that is there, and then you can convert those into a purchase order, or if you saw in the catalog, and I'll go in here again for this, I can also view place orders. This is going to go into the screen here where I can either add this once it is actually loaded. I can add it to an existing purchase order, or I can create a new purchase order here. So, and in this case, you can see that this has actually been included. Also, the ones that it has already been included in purchase orders, there are already line items for it. So, which is cool information. My automatic vacuum just started. It's outside the door, but I closed the door today. Okay, so let's pop back here. Any questions about purchase orders? Or comments? And thank you so much to those of you who are here that use acquisitions for also providing some of your insights into how the workflows work in your library. Okay, invoices. Invoices are a whole thing. And this is where we kind of get away from cataloging, because we touched briefly with acquisitions on cataloging, because of course that item is going to be, needs to go through tech services and be prepared to actually circulate. But now we're going back toward administration and paying for the thing. And so there are, again, several mechanisms for this. Invoices are going to be automatically generated if this is an EDI process, as opposed to if it is a non-EDI order, then it is going to be accounted for in a variety of ways, keeping in mind that the invoices in Evergreen, Indiana, they can be used for and represent different things in each different library. Perhaps they are the thing that is the place where you are actually receiving things, because there is the possibility to do that, and I'll show you that in just a second. Perhaps they are the spot that you're just using to essentially debit the money that you have budgeted in Evergreen to spend on the stuff. So it's keeping this running tally of what you've spent so that you are using it for budgeting purposes. It can also be used as a printable mechanism if you actually want to send these things to the provider. So this can be the documentation where you say, I wrote this check, this is exactly what it's for. So it can be something like that. This is, as much as the others are customized to your workflow, this may be even more so. Some libraries are going to use this very heavily, and some are going to use it very minimally. But this is going to be the point where you finish out the acquisitions part of acquisitions, where you close that order process here by saying, we've ordered it, we've received it, and now we've paid for it, and we can be done with the acquisitions part of it. And this item has gone on to its life as a library material. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to close out that part right here. I'm going to go, I'm definitely going to close out of that and that. And I'm going to go into my little test PO that I created. Now, this is going to take, of course, a moment to load. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to activate this order. And is there anything that I want to upload for this? I don't really have any for this. I'm just going to submit this. I might have missed a very crucial step here. I'm going to say that I did miss a very crucial step here. Because I didn't actually include anything here. So I'm going to go back to this PO. No, that's not how I'm going to do that. If you click on the PO name, you can actually rename it. So I am going to activate this without loading the items. So this is now activated. And what I'm going to do from here, you can see it's on order, is I'm going to go ahead and create an invoice. So this is one way that you can do this. There are other ways. The first thing that I need to do is I need to give this a name. So it says vendor invoice ID. That is the name that you are providing it. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a date, and I'm going to make sure I know that it's fake. The default for the receiving method is paper. The option is EDI. If it is EDI, that's going to be automatically in there. So this meaning that I got a paper invoice and I'm reflecting it in here. In this case, I'm going to say that I ordered one and it cost what I was actually billed. I'm going to say $9 just because I'm tired of inflation. So I'm making it up. That's going to be automatically populated into the paid category. And then I have the option, I can also add some direct charges if I want to. So things not associated with the actual material, but if I wanted to say that there was a shipping charge here, and I should be able to pick a fund from there, but I did not. Let's see if there's anything else up top. Oh, I'm going to pick check and receiver. And I'm going to say it's $2.99 shipping. And that's going to be automatically set here. One of the things that we have been working through is the ability to prorate. Wouldn't matter for this one because I only have one thing in that purchase order. And I'm going to go ahead and every single one of these here is actually going to save any changes that you've made. So you can save and clear. I'm not sure exactly why you would do that unless it was just maybe to clone it, but I'm going to go ahead and save. That's going to keep me in here. So one of the things that I want you to notice about this screen right here is that I have not yet received these things. You can see when it's ordered, there are 0 received, 0 have been invoiced because I haven't received them. I haven't claimed anything. So I am going to go ahead and from this invoice, this is not the only place to do this. In fact, it's depending again on your workflows, you may never receive from here, but it is something that you can do. If you click on receive items, it's going to give you the option to for those things in that invoice that still need to be received. You'll have the option to either do this single selection here. You can also look at the list mode, which will allow you to select one or more in that list. Again, there's only one in here, but numeric mode is just going to be the one. I'm actually not going to receive this yet. I'm going to go ahead and return to this invoice because the other thing I want to show you in this invoice, and once you're in here too, it's not going to show the details every time, but you can just click on the details to see those. If we go into search, that's going to search within all of your stuff where you can actually add things directly to this invoice. So you can search within your line items but then using all of these attributes here. If I wanted, I'm not going to go through it. There's a lot of ways that you could kind of go into the weeds, and I encourage you to look through these. And also, one of the things that I am working on is, and working with others on the admin team, is to build out the test server so that some of these things are already done or configured so that you can go in there without them being refreshed away on Sundays and either just take a look at how some things are done or also practice doing them yourselves. So you can always take a look at whatever is visible to you in both the production server or in the training server. There are some maintenance things that need to happen right now in the training server, but you can also go in and play as much as you like. So I'm going to go again back to the invoice view. And I'm not receiving this here because I want to show you some other places to receive there. And I'm going to come back to invoices because we're going to show you the final step for that. Let me see where I want to show this to you from. Okay, so I'm going to actually go back to not this. I'm going to get out of Zionsville's thing. And I'm going to go into this PO. I'm just going to link back directly from the invoice. Once there is an invoice associated with any of the line items in your purchase order, you'll see those reflected here. Now, of course, I only have one line item in here, so it makes sense. I'd only have one invoice associated with it. You can have many invoices associated with one purchase order. Now, the exception to that being if it's an EDI purchase order, because it's going to be automated processes, so generally only be one invoice for an EDI purchase order. But for something, and I'm going to use Amazon again as an example because they don't offer EDI, you may be receiving things at different times, especially if you have pre-orders in that order, and you're getting invoices at different times. So you may see or have created many invoices for a purchase order for that. Or if there is an invoice that you want it to be included, this is also then an opportunity for you to add it to an already existing invoice, or again, you can create an invoice from here. But I'm going to, from here, there are a couple places that you can receive this. So in this case, I have one line item that has one copy. And so if I were to either receive from the actions menu where I mark selected line items as received, it would be the same as if I went into copies, waited for this to populate, and then marked this as received. Now I'd also have the opportunity, if I wanted to update anything here, I could. Collection code is not a necessary thing, but it may be something that your library chooses to use for some reason. I'm going to mark this as received here. And I'm going to head back to the I don't actually want to go to the invoice. I'm going to go to the purchase order. So I clicked on return, but not to return to invoice. And you can see here that the purchase order now says received. And if I click then on this invoice, I can also click on invoice down here for the line item. But I'm going to just click onto it since there's only one here. And you can see there is my invoice. And then once I am in here and I select a fund, and I'm going to select from here. And I'm not going to worry about that title description. I'm going to click save because I just like to save and look at things. And then I'm going to click close because all of this has been paid. It has gone through it. And when I click close, it's going to close the invoice. And then if I go back to this purchase order, we'll wait for this to load. Now you can see that this is indicated as paid so that the funds are no longer encumbered, they are actually spent from there. And so if I go ahead and expand this and see what fund this came from, I can, depending on what permissions you have, if you are also an acquisitions administrator, you can look at those funds and see what state they are in. And I think that that would be a nice conversation to have at the local library level, how that is going to be interacting. And I don't think that these are going to link directly into those funds really anywhere. But I'm going to go ahead and just double check that. I'm going to just copy that line item ID. And I'm going to do a search because that's just, again, That's where we're at now. There are a couple things in terms of search. We have the general search, which we looked at multiple times, where we have the 4 tabs for line item search, purchase order search, invoice search, and selection list search. And then we also have the option to use the legacy search interface. A couple of things I want to point out about each of these searches is that you can set up your default search. And I'm going to actually search for that line item ID real quickly. I picked the wrong line item ID. That's the one. Okay, and I'm going to hang here for a second. So you can set this as your default search. You can add more parameters to that search strategy, whether you save them as default or not, is perfectly fine. And each of these can have their own set of defaults set up depending on your workflows. In most cases, I really like to have the retrieve results immediately. I'm actually on my personal laptop right now, so I don't have all the same defaults that I have in my work system here. And so depending on what you're doing, it may be appropriate to have all of these have different defaults on them, which is a handy thing that is not available in the legacy search interface. The other type of search that is here is for provider. And I do want to take a look real quickly at providers. They're going to be set up for you, but it may be something that you need to provide more information for them. So in this case, I do have this already set. It's going to be looking for whatever the context is going to be, whatever your workstation is set up. So you may need to change this, and Porter County would definitely be an example because they're using the system level and your workstation's never going to be set up to that, to select the owner as being here. And then you can also have the descendants checked if you want to see if there is anything below that. You can see that this is still showing the consortial part. This can get a little messy in here, but in this case, I've gone ahead and I see the providers for Porter County, and I'm going to just select one that is recognizable. And as soon as I select it, it's going to open up the provider interface. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the search form, which is going to also hide my search results. And in this case, you can see now I'm in the provider. And a lot of this is going to be administrative, but it may be such that you do want to go in and you can access any invoices that are associated with that provider, any purchase orders that are associated with that provider. And so this can be another entry point into these different interfaces, the different tools that you're using. Patron requests. This is going to be the last thing we talk about. This is something that I would characterize as being 95% done, but that last 5% is really important in some cases. So what patron requests means right now is that somehow you get information from patrons that says, I want this thing that is not available yet. It's not in your collection. What is missing from this right now is that Evergreen does not provide that patron accessible mechanism to create the requests. It is something that is definitely desirable by a lot of organizations, and that we as an administrative staff also are seeking out ways to get this developed. But it does not exist yet. So I'm going to show you the part that does exist and how it works so far. This is going to be accessible through the acquisitions menu and also through a patron's record. I'm going to show you what I have here in this example is just a screenshot of the interface and then the form for creating a new patron request. But let's go ahead and look in here real quickly. I'm just going to pop back to the home screen. And we're going to find this under patron requests. And it's going to populate this. I'm going to pop back through here. And I feel like I have, there we go. Somehow I got into the old interface. Unless I did it through cataloging. No, I didn't. Who knows? So I'm going to go ahead and click on, you can see that there are some patron requests in here already. So say somebody has come to you at the circulation desk or the reference desk or sent you something via email or whatever, you can go into this. You're going to be required to include the user barcodes. It's going to automatically then populate their user ID. It's going to populate the request date with today, whenever you're putting this in here. If they need it before a time, date or time, you can put that in here. That's not required. In fact, you can see that nothing in here shows as completely required. The only thing is going to be this user barcode more than anything, and then the request type. And as soon as those are populated, I'm going to go ahead and just pop something in there. You don't need anything. Oh, I see. It's because it doesn't exist. So I'll just use a real one. That's me. So from here, I'm going to select a book and I'm going to put in an E probably isn't helpful. And as soon as I have some type of identifying information here, it's going to enable this save button. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to also select that I want to place a hold for this, even though this isn't a real thing right now. But now it's going to start following this acquisitions process. This hold is going to be if I follow this next process. So I'm going to place that hold. And first I'm going to save this and it's going to show up in here. Take a moment to load. And let's see, I did not put a title in, so maybe it, let's see here. There's some columns real quick. It says it created it, but I don't believe it did. So let's do this again. Yep. Book. And number, title, this book. If I actually put in here that this is an article, it's going to enable the article title and pages here as well. So that can be if you are using this for something beyond, it would interact with acquisitions. It is kind of tangential to the acquiring of things that we generally think about in this, but it could be a way to also track, in some cases, some interlibrary loan requests. But I'm also not going to do them. I'm going to do this for books. If it was mentioned, I'm going to say, I'm not going to put anything in there because then all of a sudden I felt bad about it. So created acquisition patron request. Let's see, why do I not see anything here? Did I not? Oh, I know why. That's why. So, oh, look, I already have one in here. So I have this here. My home library is actually the state library, not the consortial collection. So once I have this in here, I can do actions from here. Most notably, I can add this to a selection list. So if you have a list of patron requests that have been loaded here, you can use them to create a selection list. You can do the work of adding copies, and you can from there create a purchase order. So that could be a workflow that works with this and keeps those holds attached to those patron requests. So that can be, I'm going to go ahead and another thing you can do from here is you can cancel those requests, which I'm going to cancel all of those. And, oh, I like that. I'm going to say trainees. Sounds right. And so that can be a way to use that. The other way that you can do patron requests is you can go in through the patron account. And this is a fake account. So, and I'm not actually going to, in this case, initiate anything. I'm going to go into Michaela Brown's account. And in here, I can then go to acquisition patron requests. And it's going to take me to exactly the same screen, except for you'll see up here in the upper left-hand corner that there's a user ID in there. And actually, I'm going to create one. So now if I put in, I don't know if I need the user barcode here. I'm going to not put that in here. And I'm going to say books. And again, I'm going to say this is a book, even though I just discovered that that is not necessary. You just have to have the right home library. So I'm going to save that. And you can see here that has been created for this patron. Now I can also, I believe, edit that request. And in this case, I do want to place the hold. And see if there is anything else that maybe was interesting. Yeah. And so now, as this goes through the acquisitions process, there is that hold associated with that patron request as well. Okay, again, we have the resources for today. I'm hoping to have follow-up emails sent out to you sooner rather than later. For those of you who are interested in learning more, want to set up a library-specific discussion or whatever, we can also continue the conversation in however you want to do that. Are there any questions that you have? This is a lot of stuff. One of the things that I did say yesterday, if you were not in that session, is that acquisitions is not a feature. It is a fully fleshed out set of features that comprise this module. And it requires nearly as much planning. In some cases, I would say almost more planning than when you first are automating a library. Now, most libraries are automated at this point, but if you think about going from the card catalog or a spreadsheet into a full-fledged ILS, where you have your patron and your bibliographic records now interacting with one another, that's a pretty big deal and requires planning and all of that, with knowing that you oftentimes already have a lot of your workflows established. Acquisitions does require really understanding what your workflows already are, and then how the tools that are available through the module can accommodate and make those more efficient for you. It is a lot of planning, and it is a fair amount of work, at least, to get set up. But then once it is going, it can really bring your acquiring and circulating of materials to the next level in your library. If there are no specific questions, you are welcome always to reach out to me, and I will have the email sent out as soon as possible with links to the recording. And I hope you have a great afternoon.